Welcome back, all. Today we'll be picking up from where we left off yesterday, um, when the spies came back with their report. And today, I won't only be reading or sharing the lessons from Numbers 14 to 15, but also Psalm 90. And that's because Psalm 90 was the only psalm that was written by Moses, and he wrote it during this time. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, we'll try to go as chronological as we can. So here are the lessons that I've learned and jotted down to share with you from Numbers 14 to 15 and Psalm 90. So the report of the 10 elders or the 10 leaders that went to spy out the land of Canaan caused a widespread rebellion in the whole community. They even started discussing how to elect a new leader and go back to Egypt and forget Moses, because in their mind's eye, Moses wasn't being a serious fellow at this point if he wanted them to go on. Moses and Aaron, along with Joshua and Caleb, made a very dramatic and heartfelt plea to the people. They fell on their faces, they rent their clothes, trying to convince them that the land was a good land and that God was pleased to give it to them. But instead of being encouraged by what their leaders were doing, they talked about stoning them. Especially Joshua and Caleb. And I was like, that's really serious. Like, why would you think of that? And then again, God's anger was incited against the faithless Israelites, and he was going to destroy them and keep his promise through Moses. Now, does this remind you of what happened in Exodus 22 as well, when Moses was up on the mountain and he came down and they had made the golden calf, and God was like, I'm destroying you people and going with Moses. So you see a pattern here. But Moses again interceded for the people, and he reasoned with the Lord and accepted not to, and then the Lord obviously accepted not to destroy them, but then he punished them by saying none of them would enter the promised land. So none of the generation of these people who didn't want to go into the land anyways because they were afraid, God said, right, you guys, you will die in the wilderness. It is your children, the generation after you, that would go. And so they were destined. God destined them to wander the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for every day that those spies spent sourcing out the land. Remember, they were gone for 40 days. So this was the punishment that they got. And after God had said this, then the people now said, okay, you know what? Oh, instead of staying and waiting for 40 years, let's go now. And Moses was like, no, you can't, because God has pronounced his judgment. And they were like, oh, in spite of the judgment, they just wanted to go, so let's go. So let's go. And then obviously the Amalekites that lived in the hills attacked them and chased them back, because they were trying to go without God's consent and outside of God's will. And to be honest, it was all too little too late. In chapter 15, God gave Moses laws concerning offerings by the people when they eventually settled in the land. The laws were applicable to both the native-born Israelites and the foreigners that lived among them. They were now equal in God's eyes. So now let's move to Psalm 90, which was a psalm and a prayer by Moses during the times of the rebellion. That psalm was quite heartfelt, and he asked God for favor and blessings, and he reflects on the brevity of life and also prays for success from God in their endeavors. Now here are the lessons or the character that I saw of God. God is still loving. Even after his wrath has been meted out, he returns to his original nature, which is love. Not as if he deviates from it, but then after his wrath is satisfied, he goes back into love mode, because after dealing with the people's rebellion, he goes back to giving them laws again. Like, they had done all the things that he did, and when that was done, it was like, right, now these are the laws for when you enter the land, because it was almost as if to say, yeah, you've done what you need to do, I've handled it, now on to the regular programming, because I'm not changing my mind about this. And we found out that God always gave his laws to the people whenever they camped in a place, giving them the instructions little by little. And for me, I feel like it's so that they don't get overwhelmed. And in this instance, he starts by saying, when you come into the land, indicating that in spite of all their rebellion and their sin, he still loved them and was going to keep his promise. And he showed his tenderness towards them in the words that he spoke and in his edicts. So that's what I took from this. God is still loving in spite of it all. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow I'll be sharing lessons from Numbers 16 to 17, which is all about the rebellion of Korah. See you then. Have a nice evening.